A lot of prisoners are used to try substances that control feelings. However, everything goes wrong when they try the love one. Today on Cinema Recapped, I'll show you a thriller sci-fi movie called Spiderhead. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The film begins with a prison called Spiderhead, in which we see that they experiment with the inmates by applying a substance on them which controls their feelings. We meet Jeff, an inmate who, like the others in that prison, agreed to be part of this experiment on the condition that the sentence be reduced. Jeff speaks to a friend named Lizzie and tells her that that morning they experimented with a new substance on him. Then we see a flashback of Jeff in which we realize that in the past he had a car accident with a friend because he was drunk. The next day, we meet Steve, the leader of the prison, who is in charge of the investigations. He calls Jeff and another inmate named Heather. The leader puts these two inmates in a room and then applies a new substance to them. It causes them to look attractive to each other, to the point that they end up making love. Then the leader and his assistant name the experiment the substance of love, although we see that after the effect wears off, Jeff and the girl end up very uncomfortable. Another day, the leader calls Jeff to do the experiment again, but this time he puts twice as much of the substance and also an older woman, and we see that the substance has the same effect, because they also end up making love. Then we see that all the inmates have a device attached to their back. This device is one that applies the substances from the experiments to them when it is activated by a cell phone. Later, the leader sends for Jeff, and when he arrives he realizes that, in a room, they have the two women with whom he was paired previously. The leader tells him that he's going to apply a very aggressive substance to one of them, and that Jeff has to choose which one. Jeff replies that he cannot choose, that he prefers that it's not applied to any of them, but that if he had to decide for one, his choice would be random. So the leader tells him that what he is trying to find out is if he has any preference for one over the other, or feels something special for one of them due to the experiment with the substance of love. Jeff replies that he did feel something for them, but that feeling vanished when the effect of the substance wore off. The leader ends that experiment, leaving the two girls alone, and we see a little more of Jeff's memories. After the accident, he managed to save himself, but his friend did not. That Friday, like every week, they let Jeff make a call, and he decides to call his wife, who apparently resents him because of the accident, since she doesn't answer him. He just leaves a message on her voicemail, apologizing for the last time, and promises not to bother her again. Another day, the leader calls Jeff again for another experiment, and this time he puts a man in as his partner. Jeff gets very angry and refuses to be supplied with the substance of love with him, and he also says that his member still hurts from last time. The leader tells him not to worry, because it has nothing to do with the substance of love, and after a few minutes of silence, he lets them go. Jeff suspects that they may have placed one of the girls in a position to choose between him and the other man, just as they did with him, so he decides to go ask the leader, just to be sure. Jeff learns that this is true, and that besides him, there are many other people who were also injected with the substance of love. He gets very angry and complains to the leader, saying that they're not puppets for intimate entertainment. The leader replies that he's not doing it for fun, that he's doing it for the greater good, because if that substance is perfected, they could make many people in the world fall in love. Jeff ends up apologizing. That night, we see that the leader also has a device on his back, and that when he's alone in his room, he supplies himself with the substances to experience their effects. The next day, Jeff talks to his friend Lizzie and tells her about the substance of love. They both agree that they're doing a lot of strange experiments lately. At that moment, we observe that Jeff has feelings for Lizzie. Later, the leader calls Jeff again, and this time tells him that he's going to give the aggressive substance to Heather, the girl he was with before, and that he should tell him what it feels like to see her in bad shape. Jeff refuses to apply the substance to the girl because he does not want to see her suffer, so the leader tells him that he will go talk to the committee to try and cancel it, although we see that he does not speak to anyone, and only pretends to do so, returning, saying he couldn't convince them. Jeff, seeing that he has no choice, decides to agree to participate. They apply the substance to the girl, and, seeing her in poor condition, Jeff begins to say that he feels guilty and that he doesn't want to see her like this, but despite everything, he doesn't feel anything romantic for her. Then the desperate girl hits the wall, causing the device to break down, so when the leader tries to lower her dose, he realizes that it doesn't work, and the girl ends up unliving herself because she couldn't handle the desperation anymore. The leader and his assistant go quickly to see the girl in the room and do not realize that they leave the keys of the drawer where the notes of the experiments are. Jeff takes advantage of this opportunity and decides to take out the notebook and realizes that all the substances in the experiments are made to be sold later in the pharmaceutical industry. He tries to read some more, but he just sees that they're coming back, so he quickly puts everything away. The next day, the leader takes Lizzie for an experiment and manages to make her afraid of a stapler, thanks to a new substance designed to create phobias. At the end of the experiment, Lizzie decides to tell Jeff how badly she felt. While they are speaking, Jeff tells her about his accident and reveals that not only did his friend die, but also his wife. Jeff tells her that's why he went to jail, so Lizzie tries to calm him down so he doesn't feel guilty, and they end up making love. Later, the two start talking about the experiments, and we see that the leader sees them through the cameras and, seeing them so close, comes up with the idea of using them both for the experiment. That night, the leader sends for Jeff and tells him to give Lizzie the aggressive substance. Jeff refuses to do that to his friend. The leader decides to postpone it until the next day. Later, Jeff goes to his room, and after a while, the leader's assistant arrives to do maintenance to his device. Jeff takes advantage of the fact that the assistant is there alone with him to confess that he saw the contents of the notebook, so he already knows that there's no committee and that it is the leader who sells the substances. Then Jeff asks the assistant why he's working with the leader if he already knows he's evil. The assistant replies that he didn't know anything about his intentions before he got there, and that he just wanted to help people, so Jeff tells him that there's still time to do the right thing. The next day, the leader sends for Jeff to resume the experiment with Lizzie, and we see that the assistant isn't there. Jeff again refuses to hurt Lizzie, so the leader gets desperate and decides to tell him the reason why Lizzie is in jail, hoping that Jeff will stop protecting her. Hearing that the leader is going to confess her truth, Lizzie decides instead to tell her story herself. She tells Jeff that she forgot her 9-month-old daughter in her car for 3 hours, which caused her to die. Afterwards, Lizzie tells Jeff that she deserves to be punished for that, so she asks him to show her no mercy and do what he has to do. When he hears this, Jeff decides to pick up the phone to supply her with the substance, although we see that the one who is actually affected is the leader. The leader begins to feel bad, and Jeff explains that the assistant changed the configuration of his device so that now he can control it with that phone and that the police are on their way. The leader, hearing that his assistant betrayed him, tries to take the phone away. Jeff immediately increases the doses for the phobia and the aggression substances, causing the leader to throw himself on the ground in despair. Jeff lets him suffer for a moment, and then decides to lower his dose so he can explain why he did all this. The leader tells him that he wanted to create a substance that will force people to obey any order. Then we realize that all the substances that the leader used were meant to obey orders. For example, the order to make something love someone else, or the order to be afraid of something, and all this was to finally gather into one substance. The leader explains that he wanted to create this substance to make everyone obey, so that everyone would have to behave as they should, such as not abandoning their children, since he was abandoned as a child. Later, the leader says that it doesn't matter anymore because the substance has already failed, and decides to confess to Jeff that he and Lizzie have already been free of conviction for a long time. In a moment of distraction, the leader takes out a knife, and with it he manages to take Jeff's phone, immediately beginning to supply Lizzie with the aggression substance. The leader breaks the phone and then begins to fight with Jeff while Lizzie frantically moves around. Then Jeff manages to defeat the leader and immediately goes to save Lizzie just before Lizzie hurts herself in desperation. The leader, seeing that Jeff and Lizzie want to escape, decide to announce over the loudspeakers of the facilities that these two are trying to escape and that if they do, all the prisoners will return to their normal prisons with the full sentence. The prisoners try to stop the couple because they don't want to go back to jail, while the leader manages to leave the facility and go on a plane because he doesn't want the police to catch him. Jeff and Lizzie fight the prisoners and manage to escape from the facility. Then, just as they leave, they see the leader's plane leave and decide to take a boat and leave as well. We see that the leader is flying away very happily because he thinks he's escaped, but just at that moment, we see that his device was damaged after the fight with Jeff, and it begins to supply a substance that makes the leader lose concentration until he ends up crashing. Jeff and Lizzie see the plane crash and finally leave on the boat, saying that there is no substance of love, that it has to be something natural between human beings. The end. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe to continue watching more content like this. Thanks for watching.